In this video, we're going to learn how to create forms using HTML. Forms are very important. You would need a form to log into your Facebook account. Also, you would need a form to book your flight ticket online. You would also need a form to search an item to buy on eBay. So, what is a form? A form is a set of user inputs or fields, which the user is going to be required to populate. And then once submitted, they will form a set of data which is going to be sent to a server where it's going to be processed. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our first form. So the syntax for forms is pretty straightforward. We're going to use the form tag, and then inside the form tags we're going to have all the contents of our form. So let's create a simple form. It's going to be a login form where we require the user to input their email address and password, and to submit the form they will need to click on the login button. Okay, so first of all, let's have our email inputs. So to create an input, there are several ways of creating inputs depending on their type. Since we want to create a text input, we're gonna use the input tag. It's a self-enclosing tag, and we need to give our input a type of text since it's an email address. Okay, all right, so that's an input of type text for our email address, and also we need to give it a name. Okay, in our case we're going to name it email. So the name is going to be used when you submit the form. So your PHP code would need to recognize your inputs by its name. Okay, so every input has got a specific name to reference it as a reference. Okay, so let's add another input quickly. I'm going to go back to the email input to add some more attributes in there, but for now let's just create our password. So we're going to use again the input tag, and this time the type is going to be password, and we can also give it a name, and we can name it password. Okay, so to submit our form we're going to need another input, and this time the input is going to be of type submit. Okay, so we've got our form. Now it's pretty simple. Now to submit the form, we need to give our form a method. Okay, so there are a couple of methods we can use. I'm going to explain later in the PHP chapter the difference between each of them, but for now let's go for the get method. Usually we don't use the get method when we have a password input, but I'm just going to use it for now to show you how the form is submitted. So if I click on submit after inputting something in there, so let's write an email here, for example, and let's just write input some password. Now if I submit the form, you'll see at the top there, you can see that we've got our website address, and then we've got a question mark, and then we've got all the inputs names. So email first, okay, and we've got the email there, okay, and we've got the password, and we've got the value that we have used for the password. So the reason why we're seeing this is because we use the get method. Okay, I just wanted to show you an example of a form submission, but normally you wouldn't use the get method for a password, okay, because you don't want the password to show up in the address bar. Okay, so now we have created our form. Let's just complete it and add some more attributes to our inputs. So if we go back to the email address, we can add a placeholder to our email. Okay, so if you want to give the user a hint saying that this is this is supposed to be the email, we're just going to add a placeholder there, and we can write email, and now you can see a placeholder in there. Okay, and same thing for the password. We can add a placeholder, and we can call it password. Okay, also you can give your field a size, okay, using the size attributes, and we can set that, for example, to 30 pixels, and same thing for our password, and set that to 30 pixels as well. Okay, you can limit the number of characters that the user is allowed to input in the fields using the max length attributes, and we can set that to 100, for example. Okay, and the same for the password. You can try that and say max length is, for example, 30 characters maximum. Okay, so now if you go to the submit button, by default the value of the button, or the text you can see in the button, is going to be submit, but you can change that if you want by giving it a value, and we can set that to login. Okay, and now we can see the login text in there. So that's our simple login form that we have created to get introduced to forms. There are a few other things we can add to our form. Before we finish, let's add something else. I'm going to add a label to the email password inputs. Okay, to do that, we're going to go before the input, okay, and create a label using the label tag. And we can write, for example, email. Okay, and we need to link the label to the input using the for attributes. But we're going to need to add another attribute to our input, and this attribute is going to be an ID. I'm going to call it email. So the ID is different from the name. So the name is going to be used by PHP to recognize the input, okay, in the PHP code, but the ID is usually used either to link your input to the label, and later on you will see how you can use ID to do some CSS and decoration. Okay, but for now we're going to need to use an ID to link the label to the input. Okay, okay, and the same thing for the password. I'm going to create a label and we're going to call it password. Okay, and we need to link it to the password inputs. So we're going to give our password inputs an ID as well of password, and the same ID will go in the for attributes of our label.